I'd like to ask you, how did you sell Wall Street to the studio? I mean, old broker teaching the ropes, the young wannabe broker, doesn't seem very appetizing, or does it?
That's true, and maybe I should give you a little background on the movie, because I think you're supposed to be talking about how you develop ideas, according to Andy, correct?
Correct.
How you approach.
Later on,
So,
we are going to speak about it. Yeah.
rather than, so let me just talk a little bit about the history of it, and maybe enlighten you, maybe not. The First of all, the success of Platoon and somewhat of Salvador gave me a very good position to make a film, any film I wanted to do within reason. This was my first real studio film. This was done with the biggest budget I'd ever had before 20th Century Fox. I brought them the idea that I wanted to do a Wall Street film. Now, as you say, Wall Street had not been the most exciting subject. To my memory, they had done the Jane Fonda, Chris Christopherson film in 1979, and it was a failure, expensive film about it was based on the crash of '79 and the speculation that was starting to happen. It was not a very good film, and it disappeared. There was also, in my mind, there was a wonderful business film from 1955 called Executive Suite, with William Holden and Frederick March. It was directed by Robert Wise, and there was a script by Ernest Lehman, and it still holds up today as a classic structured story and business film. In fact, if there's time later on and somebody wants to explore, we can go over the plot of that movie, because it is a classic way in telling a story. Ernest Lehman is one of the best screenwriters, and it was beautifully done and exciting. So you can make anything exciting. You can make a business film and the buying out of a company exciting, and that's the key. So Executive Suite is right up there, and actually I did a commentary for it. It's available on DVD, if you can find it. Okay, my commentary is there. And my father had been in Wall Street for almost off and on for 40, 50 years. And he was coming to the end of his career. And a new Wall Street had come up, a much more predatory Wall Street. From the 1980 election of Ronald Reagan in the United States, the word went out to the world that the United States was open for all-out business again and would support any totalitarian regime, or what they call them authoritative regime, as long as they would do business with the United States. So that opened up the gates, not only to the bloodbaths in Central America and all the changes in the world from the 1980s on, it opened up the floodgates for the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to go back to what they call the neoliberal policies that have hurt the world so much. I gather from Andy, even Hungary has been hit by the IMF and the various demands made by the World Bank and the creditors of the world. When Reagan was in office, that was 7 years later, I had gone down to Miami and the Caribbean to do research on Scarface and on this cutthroat, free enterprise cocaine business, which was getting very, very big and very, very bloody. I was struck with the personages. I was struck by the money. I mean, in those days, we were talking $100 million was a huge amount of money compared to what's going on today. But the numbers were huge, and no one knew what to do, and it was, in a way, it was exciting and glamorous. I wrote Scarface, which was directed by Brian De Palma. The film was moderately successful. It cost too much. But during that period, flying back between Miami and New York, it was a very interesting phenomenon occurred to me. That was that young people in the United States were making that kind of money on Wall Street. And I had never, in my father's day, young people making that kind of money would be unheard of, very rare. All of a sudden, everybody was on Wall Street or in the mercantile markets and was turning over fast cash. I had a friend who literally made close to $100 million. I couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. And he had, to me, he didn't have any ethics. In fact, he did get into trouble later with one of the regulatory agencies. A lot, but what struck me was that these kids, my age, and they're 30 years old, 35 years old, were doing this kind of turnover and doing it without, with an attitude of, it's the Coke business. And they were doing a lot of Coke, too. So it was a change in values, because you realize I grew up in New York, and my father was a strict and serious man, so I always respected the business ethic of capitalism. But now it was changing. And the commissions were changing, the trade system, the computers were starting to come in. So by 1987, it seemed to me that this would be a good follow-up to Scarface, would be to do Wall Street in the way, with the vigor of Scarface, with the vigor of the cutthroat anger, the competition, the willing to not just trade with the other guy, but to kill the other guy. And I heard that kind of dialogue because a lot of the Vietnam veterans were on the street too, so you're going to wipe them out, you're going to kill them. And there was a feral velocity in the dialogue, which Stanley Weiser and I put in. We looked at The Sweet Smell of Success, which is another wonderful New York movie. Clifford Odets wrote it again with Ernie Lehman's story. And if you listen to the machine gun dialogue and the cruelty and the nastiness of people talking fast, New Yorkese, that's what we wanted to get in this movie. Because, and in a sense, it's wedded to Scarface, the same kind of brutality. On that basis, we sold it, but there is one limitation on Wall Street: you don't have guns. You can't kill like in Scarface or saw somebody's head off. You can't do that, so you have to do it up here with your head and with the transactions. So we concocted a movie that was wholly original. There was it was no book. We did talk to all the people who worked in, young people, old people who'd been involved in insider trading deals. We talked to old-timers who'd been on the street for a long time, as well as newcomers. We talked, above all, to a new class of predatory sharks who were called raiders, people like Carl Icahn, you might know, Boone Pickens. There were several, what they called them at one point, green mailers, because they were blackmailing, they were green mailing for money. They were hostaging companies. And of course, the argument from a Gordon Gekko or Michael Douglas would have been that we're doing this for the good of the company because the company is being badly run. They need to be restructured, in a sense, cannibalized, and then all the assets would be plundered from the company in all kinds of speculative dealing, leveraging. Andy Vanya knows much more about this than I do, but how to cannibalize a company.
Wait a minute, you wrote the movie.
But he made product, though. The difference is that Andy made films and made product. A lot of these guys would come in, take the company, and not make anything, and figure out, as it is in the movie, if you saw it recently, they take an airline, among other things, and they just figure it out. And Charlie Sheen figures it out to the bone, what everything is worth. They're so smart, their computers are so good, and at the same time, there's something lacking. There's a soul. You kill a company. You can kill a company. And we wanted to make a movie about that. So it was a more refined form of Scarface. And actually, we started to write it. Stanley Weiser did a first pass based on a lot of talking. Then I was finishing up Platoon at that time, and I came back in and I did my draft, and we ping-ponged back and forth, but we really tried to make it of the highest quality. Script writing is crucial to the process of making a movie. You should never start a movie until you have a script. It doesn't have to be 100% there, but you should have a script that's close to 85% there, so you know that you have something. There's nothing more dangerous than a movie being made without a feeling that you can get there on that script. And we can go into that, more detail on that. The movie came out in December 1987. And we can talk about all, I'd like to have your questions, because I don't know the degree to where you are in studying film and what you're doing. I don't want to go rambling on, but that's some of your answer.
But the original question was, how did you pursue the studio Yeah, this is not the old days. You're right. So I'm sorry to remind you, but the original question was, how did you pursue the studio to let it make?
How did I get the studio to get made?
Yeah.
I would say this. I would say the script was very good, at least in that version, and that is a very important factor. And also, I was hot in the sense that I was coming off an Academy Award on Platoon. I made one big mistake, though. I went with my sentimentality. Warner Brothers offered to make the movie. They loved me, but I gave it to 20th Century Fox because 20th Century Fox had done things like Executive Suite and had always those logos with Daryl Zanuck and the man in the flannel suit, gray flannel suit. They'd done a lot of those kinds of talk pictures. And I regret that decision because Rupert Murdoch had just bought the studio. And I never received any money from that movie. They ripped us off. And the accounting on that movie is the Murdoch accounting, which is to say they compound the interest daily. Not even you did that, Andy, but they compounded it daily. And our interest rate on Wall Street 1 reached $10 million easily by 1995. We never saw a dime. And you know what? I made the second sequel for them on the hopes that there would be a little bit more understanding. They paid me far better, but they also stole everything they could on the release. So I'll never work with Fox if I can again. I wish I'd gone with Warner Bros. I think I would have done a lot better.
Never say never.
What?
Never say never.
Well, yes, you can sometimes say never if you get older.